Did you know that humans are getting shorter? What does bacon and eggs have to do with the CIA successfully overthrowing the government of Guatemala? Which country has a life expectancy of only 14 years old? Learn the stories behind these and so much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description. This is part 2 of a series where we investigate historical figures who saw extremely ironic demises. First is Xi Wang, who was the first unified emperor of China. Before him, China was composed of many warring states, and the country's name is actually a reflection of his name. He created one unified emperor and actually had standardized currency and scripts and all kinds of other unifying frameworks, and was the one who began the construction of the Great Wall. Now, he wasn't really a good guy necessarily. He ruled ruthlessly over his own people with an iron fist, and he had quite the god complex to match. In order to protect himself in the afterlife, he commissioned the massive terracotta army that you've probably seen before. It's also said that the many thousands of people that built his burial tomb were buried alive inside of it in order to keep his secrets. It's actually kind of funny that he prepared so much for the afterlife, considering he thought he could avoid dying altogether. Obsessed with the idea of immortality, he sent out expeditions to find mythical islands of eternal life, and drank elixirs that he had his alchemists prepare in order to make him live forever. Unfortunately, those elixirs contained quite a lot of mercury, and he died as a result. His immortality pills killed him at the age of 49. The paranoia and the desire, and what he thought was the solution to live forever, was his ultimate demise. Next up is Thomas Miggley Jr., and a lot of you have probably heard his story before, but it's worth telling, and his death is very ironic. Now, he was an American engineer and chemist, and his work, he may be one of the absolute most influential individual humans who ever lived in terms of his work directly, and his work alone, directly influencing the greatest number of lives. And not in a good way. He wasn't a bad person, but he developed leaded gasoline, which poisoned the entire environment, lowered the IQs to just a horrendous level in this country, and almost certainly caused a huge amount of violent crime. If you look at graphs of the delay in years of lead getting out of the environment and crime, it's just a perfect correlation. He also invented CFCs, or chlorofluorocarbons, which eventually tore a hole in the ozone layer. So this very genius man, who was doing work for noble reasons, accidentally became probably the most environmentally destructive individual person who ever lived. Now, later in life, Miggley contracted polio, and he became partially paralyzed, so he designed an elaborate system of pulleys and ropes to help him get in and out of bed without assistance. Unfortunately, one day he became entangled in his own contraption, and he was strangled to death by his own invention. The man whose creations directly or indirectly killed and harmed countless people was ultimately also taken out by one of his own ideas, which was only designed for one person. He was too smart, it turns out, for our own good. Next up is Francis Bacon. Now, he hardly needs much of an introduction, but he was English, and he was a philosopher, he was a statesman, and he's considered the grandfather or father of the scientific method by many people. Now, the scientific method absolutely did not originate with Francis Bacon, but he put it into closest to its modern terms. And he was a Westerner, and if you're watching this video, it's very likely that you live in a Western society, and so he tends to get a lot more credit than an individual such as Ibn al-Haytham gets. Francis Bacon, as a philosopher, he championed observation and experimentation over superstition and dogma. Now, he was always, throughout his whole life, a very religious person nonetheless. One thing about Bacon is, although he wrote about the scientific method and advocated for it, he really wasn't a scientist, and he conducted basically no scientific studies. He didn't practice what he preached. Now, he wasn't a hypocrite, he just wasn't a practicer of it. Except for the thing that apparently killed him. In 1626, Bacon was riding through the snow when it's not clear if he had this idea or if somebody gave the idea to him, but it was proposed, could we use snow or the cold to preserve meat, like the way we do with salt? Well, after acquiring a chicken from a local woman who prepared it for him, Bacon took it outside and stuffed it with snow. Now, in the process, this gave him pneumonia. Now, it's a myth that you get a cold or get sick from being cold. It suppresses your immune system and makes you more susceptible to these diseases. But yeah, the father of the scientific method literally died doing an experiment on a chicken. Next up is Pietro Aritino. Pietro was a Renaissance-era Italian writer, poet, and a satirist, and he apparently was very hilarious and a little bit confrontational. He was said to have a sharp tongue and a very sharp pen as well. He had a pretty big reputation for his scandalous wit, and he wasn't afraid to roast anybody. He would attack kings and popes and noblemen, kind of like Saturday Night Live, I guess. Now, according to legend, Pietro died from laughing too hard. Specifically, somebody told him a bawdy joke at a dinner table, and the punchline hit him so hard that he fell back off of his chair and suffered a stroke and died laughing. Now, there's quite a lot of conversation surrounding what he really died from. There's thoughts that he was poisoned. There are thoughts that he had a heart attack or seizures or something else. But dying during a fit of laughter is basically generally accepted as what happened to him at his time of death. Did the laughing make him die? Well, maybe. But he did die laughing. Next is Clement Valandingham. Clement was an American lawyer, a politician, and an outspoken critic of Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. He was a fiery orator, and he was a defender of states' rights. And he was actually arrested for treasonous speech and even exiled to the Confederacy. He was in the Union. After the war ended, he did return and began practicing law and took his confrontational style, his bombastic style, to the courtroom. While defending a man accused of murder, he argued that the victim had accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol. Now, to prove it, he grabbed a gun and tried to demonstrate exactly how this theoretically could have happened. And in the process, the gun, which was loaded, went off, and he shot himself in the stomach and died of his wounds. This case of courtroom drama was enough to acquit his client, who was shot dead 4 years later in a saloon. The lawyer died, proving his point. Next is Hans Streininger. Now, Hans was the mayor of a small town in Austria. His life isn't really much to report on, but his death is just incredible irony. Hans was famous for having a beard that was over 4 feet long, and usually he kept it either rolled up or tucked into his clothing. Well, unfortunately, while trying to escape from a fire, Hans tripped over his own beard, fell down a flight of stairs, and broke his neck and died. His beard is actually on display in a museum. Our final example is Frank Grimes. Now, Grimes was abandoned at the age of 4 and lost the chance of getting an education. So instead, during his childhood, he delivered packages and was later injured in a silo explosion at the age of 18. From that point, Grimes became self-educated and was able to eventually earn a degree in nuclear physics at the age of 35. Grimes became an employee at the Springfield power plant located in Springfield, where a bitter and tense relation built between Grimes and his obviously superior coworker, Homer J. Simpson. Now, this tension grew to an eventual breaking point. After Grimes's failed attempt to sabotage Simpson's career, Grimes fell into a state of madness. In an attempt to copy the success of his superior colleague, Grimes's impersonation of Simpson led to his death when he closed the circuit between two high-voltage cables with his body. His final words were, "I don't need safety gloves because I'm Homer Simpson." The man who proved hard work can make a dream come true was killed when he started taking corners and lazily copying other people. In the end, one thing we can say for certain is that Grimes deserved it. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did and you're not a subscriber, please do that. Thanks for watching.